We're going to lose. Major General Andrew Bruce dropped the photographs onto the mahogany table. 18 officers stared at images of burned British tanks, their crews still inside. One photo showed a Matilda with the hatch blown open, a charred hand reaching toward sky. Colonel James Taylor picked up another picture. A tiger I photographed 3 weeks ago near Leningrad. Even in grainy black and white, the monster radiated invincibility. Gentlemen, Bruce continued, his voice cutting through cigarette smoke, in 9 months, maybe 12 American boys will face these. And if we send them in Shermans, they'll burn. Every single one of them. Sir, the Sherman is a good tank, Colonel Morrison protested. Reliable, proven. Against what? Bruce interrupted. Show me one Sherman that survived a tiger. One. Silence. The Germans have been building for this war since 1933, Taylor said quietly. He still limped from Belleau Wood, still remembered what happened when doctrine met reality. We have factories making tractors. If we try to match them ton for ton, gun for gun. We've already lost, Bruce finished. He walked to the chalkboard, drew 2 shapes. One heavy rectangle labeled Tiger. One small triangle labeled with a question mark. So we don't match them. We do something they'll never expect. He paused. We run away. The room exploded. Cowardice. The men will never. Unacceptable. Bruce slammed his fist down. The room went silent. I said run away, not retreat. There's a difference. He tapped the small triangle. What if we build something so fast that by the time the tiger rotates its turret, we're gone? Already fired. Already moving. What if speed becomes armor? That's suicide, Morrison said. You need armor to survive. No, Taylor said slowly, staring at the diagram. You need armor to survive getting hit. But what if you don't get hit? Bruce smiled. Exactly. Now let's build it before those boys start dying. Morrison stood up. Sir, this is insanity. You're asking us to strip armor off tanks, send men into battle in tin cans. I'm asking you to think, Bruce shot back. The Tiger weighs 56 tons, takes 10 seconds to rotate that turret. What if we build something that does 50 miles per hour? Something that appears, shoots and vanishes before the gunner even finds us. Speed is armor, someone whispered. Speed is armor, Bruce confirmed. Meeting adjourned. We start tomorrow. As the room emptied, Taylor remained. He stared at the photographs of burning tanks. Andrew, he said quietly. If you're wrong about this, then I'll be the one who killed them, Bruce replied. But if I'm right, James, we'll save thousands, maybe tens of thousands. And if the Germans laugh at us, Bruce picked up the photo of the tiger. Then we'll see who's laughing when they can't hit what they can't catch. Flint, Michigan, Buick Motor Division. Building 81, February 8, 1943. 6:23 a.m. Harley Earl wasn't supposed to be here. The legendary designer of Cadillacs and Buicks stood in a freezing factory at dawn, staring at a clay model that looked nothing like a tank and everything like a hunting cat. It's beautiful, Charles Chain whispered, running his hand along the sloped hull. It's going to get people killed, Earl replied. He pulled out the specifications. Look at this. 12.7 millimeters of armor. Charles, a .50 caliber machine gun punches through that. Then why did you design it? Because Bruce asked me a question. Earl's finger traced the sleek profile. He said, what if a tank didn't fight like a tank? What if it fought like a race car with a gun? Chain laughed nervously. That's crazy. No. Earl's voice was cold. Crazy is sending boys to die in Shermans against tigers. This. He slapped the clay model. This might actually work. Might. Charles, I've been designing cars since 1927. I know how to make something fast. I know how to make something beautiful. But I've never designed something that keeps people alive. He paused. Until now. The specs say 55 miles per hour. On roads. Off-road maybe 40. Still twice as fast as anything the Germans have. And the armor is enough to stop shrapnel. That's it. That's all it needs to be. Earl grabbed Chain's shoulder. Listen to me. This machine doesn't win by taking hits. It wins by never being there when the shell arrives. You understand? Chain stared at the model. You're building a ghost. I'm building a predator, Earl corrected. Something that appears, kills, and disappears. Something that makes the Germans afraid of empty fields because they know we're out there somewhere moving at 50 miles per hour. What are you calling it? Earl smiled. The boys in the shop started calling it Hellcat because it's fast, mean, and comes from nowhere. 3 months later, Colonel Taylor arrived from Washington to inspect progress. The first prototype sat in the assembly bay, engine exposed, turret still unpainted. Jesus Christ, Taylor breathed. Sir, Earl approached. It looks like you welded a gun to a sports car. That's exactly what I did, sir. Taylor walked around the machine slowly. His hand touched the thin armor, felt it flex slightly under pressure. Harley, this won't stop anything. Correct, so don't get hit. Don't get... Taylor stopped, stared. You're serious. Sir, let me ask you something. Earl climbed onto the Hellcat. What's more dangerous, a Sherman with 3 inches of armor that goes 25 miles per hour, or this with half an inch that does 55? The Sherman survives longer. No, sir. The Sherman burns slower. There's a difference. Earl's voice dropped. I watched the footage from North Africa. Kasserine Pass. Those Shermans didn't die because they lacked armor. They died because they couldn't escape. The Germans locked on, fired, reloaded, fired again. Our boys were targets. And this changes that how? This doesn't get locked on, Earl said simply. This shoots first from an angle the Tiger can't respond to, then it's gone. By the time the German gunner rotates his turret, we're half a mile away, setting up the next shot. Taylor was silent for a long moment. General Bruce is going to have a stroke when he sees this. Or a revelation, sir. What's the engine? Wright R975 radial, 400 horsepower. Same engine in the dive bombers. You put an aircraft engine in a tank. I put an aircraft engine in a tank destroyer, Earl corrected. Different mission, different philosophy. Sir, the Germans have been winning because they prepare for every known threat. But how do you prepare for something that doesn't act like a tank, that appears from nowhere, kills your best armor and vanishes? Taylor looked at the designer for a long time. You're talking about changing psychological warfare. I'm talking about survival through speed, not steel, Earl replied. The question isn't, can our armor withstand their guns? The question is, can their gunners track a target doing 50 through broken terrain? Can they? Earl smiled. Let's find out. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, July 15th, 1943. 0847 hours. The test that would define everything. General Bruce assembled every skeptic in the War Department. 32 officers stood in the observation tower watching the course. 7 miles of hell. Mud hills, tank traps simulated enemy fire. 10 targets at the end representing German armor at various ranges. The captured Panzer IV completed it in 18 minutes. 4 hits out of 10. Lieutenant Ernest Gates climbed into the Hellcat commander position. 24 years old. His brother died at Kasserine 3 months ago, burned alive in a Sherman. She's all yours, Lieutenant, the chief mechanic said. Try not to flip her. Gates settled into his seat. No overhead protection, just sky. All stations ready. Ready, his crew replied. General Bruce Cho, Gates called on the radio. Whenever you're ready, son. Sir, permission to speak freely. Granted. My brother died because his tank was too slow. If this doesn't work, then we find another way. Bruce interrupted. But it will work, Ernest. Trust the machine. Gates took a breath. Driver, start engine. The right radial coughed once, twice, then roared like an aircraft taking off. The entire Hellcat vibrated with barely contained violence. In the observation tower, Colonel Morrison checked his watch. 18 minutes. That's the time to beat. $10 says he rolls it in the first turn, someone offered. I'll take that bet, Taylor said quietly. Mark, Bruce said into the radio. Driver, punch it. The Hellcat exploded forward. Not rolled, not rumbled, launched. Jesus! Gates's gunner screamed. We're at 35. 40, the driver yelled back. Keep it pinned, Gates commanded. The acceleration pressed him into his seat. Trees blurred past. The first checkpoint appeared. Mud pit ahead, the driver warned. Slowing down. Negative. Keep speed, we fly or we die. In the tower. Morrison grabbed his binoculars. He's not slowing down. He's going to bog. The Hellcat hit the mud at 42 miles per hour. For 3 seconds it seemed to float, tracks barely touching. Then they caught, and it was through mud spraying 50 feet behind. Contact left 800 yards, Gates shouted. Gunner target Panzer. Identified. Fire. The 76mm barked. The target erupted in theatrical smoke. But Gates didn't stop. While traditional doctrine said, halt, verify, proceed, the Hellcat was already accelerating toward the next objective. He's not stopping, Morrison said. He doesn't need to, Taylor replied. Watch. The Hellcat hit the next turn at 38 miles per hour. Physics said it should roll. The suspension compressed the entire machine, leaning like a race car. For one heart-stopping second it looked finished. It wasn't. It came out of the turn faster, engine howling. Contact right 600 yards. Identified and fire. Second target destroyed. Morrison checked his watch. 4 minutes elapsed. The Panzer was halfway through at this point. He's going to make it, someone whispered. He's going to break the record, Taylor corrected. The Hellcat screamed through the course like a demon. Every turn taken at speeds that should have been impossible. Every target engaged while moving. No stops, no hesitation. Pure, relentless aggression. 10 minutes 34 seconds after starting, it crossed the finish line. 9 targets destroyed. 1 miss. The observation tower was silent. Gates climbed out, face-flushed hands shaking with adrenaline. General Bruce walked down to meet him. Son, Bruce said quietly, you just obsoleted 20 years of tank doctrine. Gates smiled, tired, fierce. Sir, with respect, the Germans did that at Kasserine. We just finally caught up. Bruce turned to the assembled officers. Gentlemen, this is the future of armored warfare. Fast, lethal, gone before the enemy can respond. Any questions? Morrison stepped forward. Sir, I was wrong. I'll admit it. But I have one concern. Speak freely, Colonel. This works in Maryland on a test course, but in combat, against real tigers, real panthers. When the shooting starts and men are dying, will crews really trust speed over armor? It was Gates who answered. Sir, you want to know if we'll trust it? He walked to the Hellcat, placed his hand on the thin armor. My brother trusted 3 inches of Sherman armor. The Germans burned through it like paper. This, he slapped the hull. This doesn't pretend to protect me. It tells me the truth. Don't get hit, and it gives me the speed to make that possible. He looked Morrison in the eye. Colonel, I'll take honest speed over false protection any day. At least I know what I'm working with. Bruce nodded slowly. Load them on ships. We're going to war. Camp Hood, Texas. December 1943. Week 1. 542 men of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion stared at their new equipment with something between horror and disbelief. They expect us to fight tigers in these? Sergeant Mike Russo asked nobody in particular. His gunner, Tommy Wright, a 19-year-old kid from Kansas, ran his hand along the thin armor. Sarge, I can see daylight through some of these welds. That's because you're looking at the drain holes right. Oh. Wright didn't sound convinced. Captain John Thornton gathered the company around one Hellcat. Forget everything you know about tanks. This isn't a tank. Different mission, different tactics, different survival strategy. Sir, this armor won't stop a strong wind, Russo said. Correct. So don't be there when they shoot. Thornton climbed onto the Hellcat. Question. What's more dangerous? A Sherman that takes 3 hits before it burns, or this which takes 1 hit but moves twice as fast? The Sherman, sir. It survives longer. Wrong, Thornton said flatly. The Sherman dies slower. Huge difference. That Sherman has to close to effective range. Takes time. The Germans see it coming, track it, wait for the perfect shot. Our boys are targets from the moment they're spotted. He patted the Hellcat. This appears at effective range already. Fires. Vanishes. The Germans never get a good shot because we're never where they expect us to be. And if they do get a shot, Russo pressed. Thornton's face hardened. Then you die fast instead of burning alive. Your choice, Sergeant. I know which I prefer. The training that followed was unlike anything in American armor doctrine. No formation driving. No frontal assaults. No sustained engagements. Instead, they practiced ambush. Hit and run. Shoot and scoot. Speed is life, instructors screamed. Move, shoot. Move again. Never stay still. Never give them a target. Week 3. Texas desert. 112 degrees Fahrenheit. Russo's Hellcat stalled mid-drill. Again. Damn it! He kicked the side. This piece of shit is gonna get us killed. Thornton walked over. Problem, Sergeant. Sir, honest opinion. These things are death traps. 1 shell and we're done. No second chances. No margin for error. You're absolutely right. Russo blinked. Sir. 1 shell. You're done. Thornton pointed at a Sherman training 200 yards away. But that Sherman takes 3 shells before it burns. You know how long between shells 1 and 2, 8 to 12 seconds. You know what happens in those seconds. He climbed onto Russo's Hellcat. The crew realizes they're hit. They try to bail out. The second shell arrives, traps them. The third shell lights it up. And they burn Sergeant. They burn for minutes, screaming. The area was silent. Thornton slapped the Hellcat. You take 1 shell, you're probably dead. But you know what? You won't take that shell, because you'll be moving at 50 miles per hour. You'll take your shot from a position the Germans aren't expecting at a range where your gun works, but they can't respond effectively. Then you'll be gone. And if we're not fast enough, then you die quick instead of slow. Still your choice. Russo stared at him, then at the Hellcat. Then he climbed back in. Driver, start her up. Let's go again. By February 1944, something had changed. The doubt was gone. Replaced by something harder, colder. Lieutenant William Patterson, whose crew would later achieve the highest kill count in Europe, explained it perfectly during a night training session. We're not armored warriors, he told his men. We're not knights in shining tanks. We're assassins. We kill from ambush, from angles they don't expect at ranges where we have advantage. We don't give the Germans a fair fight. Isn't that cowardice, sir? Wright asked. No, Wright. Cowardice is sending men into battle with tactics that get them killed. Patterson gestured to the Hellcat. This is intelligence. This is using our advantages. Speed, maneuverability, training. We hit hard, we hit fast, we disappear, and the Germans never see us coming. The breakthrough came mid-February during a mock battle. The 704th played German armor. The 705th, equipped with slower M10 tank destroyers, played Americans. By doctrine, the heavier M10s should have dominated. They were slaughtered. The Hellcats used speed to attack from multiple directions simultaneously. They never stayed in one place long enough to take effective fire. They appeared killed, vanished. appeared again from a different angle. Killed again. The exercise ended with 14 M10s destroyed and only 2 Hellcats damaged. Colonel Morrison, watching from the command post, removed his helmet slowly. "This isn't tank warfare anymore." "No, sir," Taylor agreed. "This is something new, something the Germans have never seen." "Will it work in Europe?" "We're about to find out." New York Harbor, March 28, 1944. 30 hours. USS General Black sat low in the water loaded with men and Hellcats. The 704th and 705th Tank Destroyer Battalions prepared to depart for England. Russo stood on deck, watching the Manhattan skyline disappear into morning haze. Wright appeared beside him. "Sarge, you scared?" Russo considered lying, decided against it. "Terrified." "Me too." Wright was quiet for a moment. "You really think this speed thing works against real Germans?" Russo thought about the training, the countless drills, the exhilaration of pushing the Hellcat to 50 through Texas hills, the way it moved like liquid speed. "Kid, I've been thinking about it wrong," he said finally. "I kept asking myself, can speed replace armor? But that's the wrong question. What's the right question? Can armor replace speed?" Russo turned to face him. "Because in a Sherman you're slow, predictable. The Germans see you coming track, you wait for the perfect shot. All that armor does is delay the inevitable." He pointed back toward the hold where their Hellcat waited. "But in that, we choose when to engage, where to engage, how long to stay. We're never where they expect, never giving them time to set up the perfect shot. So we're hunters instead of prey." "Exactly." Russo smiled grimly. "And the Germans are about to learn what it feels like to be hunted." Below deck, Gates sat in his Hellcat, running his hand along the controls. 3 years ago, his brother climbed into a Sherman believing armor would protect him. It didn't. Tomorrow, Gates would climb into this machine believing speed would protect him. The difference was, he knew what he was gambling on. His brother never had that choice. "Speed is armor," he whispered to the empty turret. Somewhere in Germany, Tiger commanders prepared their machines confident in their superiority. Confident that weight and armor would win as they always had. They had no idea that across the Atlantic 500 Americans were coming who refused to fight that battle, who had chosen a different path, a faster path. In 8 months at a place called Arracourt, the Germans would learn the price of that confidence. And it would be paid in burning steel and shattered doctrine destroyed by machines that refused to stay still long enough to die. The Atlantic crossing took 14 days. 14 days of cramped quarters, stale air, and the constant awareness that German U-boats hunted these waters. Russo spent most of it in the hold, with his Hellcat checking systems that didn't need checking. Running calculations he'd already memorized. "You're going to wear a hole in that seat," Wright said on day 9. "Better than wearing a hole in my brain thinking about what's waiting over there." "Tigers?" "Worse, the unknown." Russo looked at his gunner. "We've trained against targets that don't shoot back, against instructors who know we're coming. But over there, the Germans have been doing this for 5 years. They've killed thousands of tanks. They know every trick." "Except ours," Wright said quietly. "They've never seen anything like the Hellcat." "That's what scares me, kid. What if speed doesn't matter when they're that good?" Wright was quiet for a long moment. "Sarge, my dad told me something before I enlisted. He said fear is just your brain trying to prepare you for things that haven't happened yet. And most of those things never do." "Your dad sounds smart." "He died at Pearl Harbor." Wright's voice was flat. "Didn't help him much." Russo had no answer for that. Southampton, England, April 12, 1944. 1340 hours. The Hellcats rolled off the transport ships into a country that had been at war for nearly 5 years. British soldiers watched the strange American machines with undisguised curiosity. "Christ, are those tanks?" a Tommy asked his mate. Dunno. Look like lorries with guns. They look like coffins, another voice said. Gates, overhearing, walked over. They're tank destroyers. Fast ones. Fast won't matter when Jerry puts an 88 through you, Yank. Gates smiled without humor. Jerry has to see us first. That's the trick. The British soldier laughed. You'll learn. We all did. Speed armor prayer makes no bloody difference. The Tigers always win. Then I guess we'll have to change that, Gates replied. For 6 weeks, the 704th and 705th trained in the English countryside, adapting their tactics to European terrain. The rolling hills and hedgerows of Normandy bore little resemblance to Texas deserts. This is claustrophobic, Patterson said during a reconnaissance run. These hedgerows are 12 feet high, can't see more than 50 yards in any direction. Good for us, Thornton replied. Germans can't see us either, and we're faster through these lanes than their heavy armor. Or we're trapped like rats when we hit a dead end. Then don't hit dead ends, Bill. But Patterson had touched on something that worried every Hellcat commander. In Texas, they had space, room to maneuver to use their speed. Here, the ancient field boundaries channeled movement limited options. One wrong turn and you could face a Panther head-on with nowhere to run. It changes the tactics, Gates said during an officers' meeting. We can't rely on pure speed here. We need to think 3 moves ahead, know every escape route before we commit. Sounds more like chess than tank warfare, someone said. Good, Thornton replied, because the Germans play chess, and they've been winning for 5 years. Time we learned the game. Normandy, France, June 8, 1944. D-Day +2. The invasion had begun 2 days earlier. Now the 704th was being fed into the meat grinder. Rousseau's first sight of combat was a burning Sherman on the side of the road, its crew laid out beside it, under blood-stained ponchos. A medic sat nearby, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. Tiger, Rousseau asked as they passed. The medic looked up with dead eyes. Panther, 800 yards. First shot penetrated the front. Second shot lit it up. They never even saw it. The crew. Driver made it out. Rest cooked. The medic took a long drag. You boys are in tank destroyers. Yeah. What kind? Hellcats. Fast ones. The medic laughed a sound without humor. Fast. Right. Good luck with that. He gestured to the dead Sherman. They were fast too. Didn't matter. Wright turned green. Rousseau grabbed his arm. Don't look, kid. Eyes forward. But those men are dead. We're not. Let's keep it that way. They rolled deeper into Normandy. Every mile brought new evidence of the war's violence. Destroyed vehicles, abandoned equipment, graves marked with rifles and helmets. The smell of death and cordite hung in the air like fog. This is worse than I imagined, Wright said quietly. It's exactly what I imagined, Rousseau replied, which is why we stick to doctrine. Speed is armor. Hit and run. Never stay still. Sarge, what if we run into a tiger? Then we pray it's pointing the wrong direction. Their first engagement came 3 hours later. A farmhouse reported to have German armor nearby. The 704th was ordered to investigate and destroy if possible. Gates took point with 3 Hellcats. They moved slowly through the narrow lanes, every sense screaming alert. The hedgerows pressed in from both sides, limiting visibility to almost nothing. I hate this, Gates muttered. Can't see anything. Can't maneuver. Contact, his driver suddenly said. Movement ahead 200 yards. Gates strained to see through the foliage. There, a flash of gray paint, a low profile. Panzer. Can't tell what kind. Orders, sir. Every instinct screamed to reverse to find another route. But doctrine was clear. Tank destroyers hunt armor. That's the mission. All units hold position. We advance to 100 yards, take the shot, then reverse at maximum speed. On my mark. Sir, we don't know what's behind that hedge. Then let's find out. Gates felt his heart hammering. This was it. The moment all that training either proved itself or got them killed. Driver forward slow. Gunner track that target. The Hellcat crept forward. 150 yards. 125. 100. The German tank came into full view. Not a Panther, a Panzer IV. Older, lighter, but still deadly. Gunner target identified. Locked on, sir. Fire! The 76mm barked. The shell caught the Panzer on the side, exactly where the armor was thinnest. A flash, then smoke. Hit, the gunner yelled. Driver reverse now! The Hellcat shot backward, engine screaming. They'd barely moved 20 yards when the hedgerow where they'd been sitting exploded. A shell from somewhere else. A second German tank they hadn't seen. Contact right! Wright screamed. Panther, Panther! Keep reversing! Gates commanded. His mind raced. They were exposed. The Panther had them zeroed. One more second, and the second Hellcat in their platoon fired. The shell hit the Panther's track, immobilizing it. Third unit flank left, Gates ordered. Hit it from the side. The third Hellcat, commanded by Lieutenant Patterson, broke from cover and raced along a parallel lane at 40 miles per hour. The Panther's turret began rotating to track him, but Patterson was too fast. By the time the German gunner acquired target, Patterson had already stopped fired and hit the Panther's side armor. The German tank erupted in flames. All units withdraw. Now. The three Hellcats reversed at maximum speed. Engines howling, putting distance between themselves and the kill zone. They didn't stop until they'd put 800 yards and 3 hedgerows between themselves and the burning German armor. Gates climbed out of his turret on shaking legs. His uniform was soaked with sweat despite the cool June air. Patterson approached, grinning. It works. Holy shit, it actually works. We almost died, Gates said. But we didn't, because we were fast enough. Patterson slapped the Hellcat. The Panther never got a clean shot. We appeared killed, disappeared, just like training. That was blind luck. No, Patterson said firmly. That was speed, that was training, that was us being faster than their turret rotation. If we'd been in Shermans, we'd be burning right now. Gates wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Because Patterson was right. Over the next 6 weeks, the 704th learned the brutal arithmetic of tank warfare. The Germans were good. Better than good. Veterans with 5 years of experience fighting with some of the finest armor ever built. But the Hellcats had speed. And slowly, painfully, the Americans learned to turn that speed into victory. The trick, Thornton explained during a July briefing, is never fighting their fight. They want frontal engagements where armor thickness matters. We give them flanking attacks where speed matters. They want sustained duels. We give them ambushes. They want to see us coming. We appear from nowhere. And when we can't avoid their fight, someone asked, then we run. No shame in it. Live to fight another day. Dead heroes don't kill tigers. Rousseau's crew destroyed their first German tank on July 18th. A Panzer IV caught in the open trying to cross a field. They fired from 600 yards, hit the engine, then disappeared before the German crew could react. That night, Wright threw up behind their Hellcat. You okay, kid? I killed people today, Sarge. Yeah, you did. Rousseau sat down beside him. You want me to tell you it gets easier. Does it? No, it just becomes necessary. Rousseau pulled out a cigarette, lit it. Those men in that Panzer, they'd have killed us without hesitation. They'd have killed 100 of our guys if we hadn't stopped them. That's the job. Doesn't make it easier. Nothing about this is easy, Tommy. But here's what I know. Every tank we kill is one less Sherman crew that burns. One less infantry platoon that gets shredded. We're the predators now. That's the only way we survive. Wright was quiet for a long time. Speed is armor. Speed is armor, Rousseau confirmed. By late August 1944, the 704th had been in combat for 11 weeks. They'd destroyed 43 German tanks and lost 18 Hellcats. The math was brutal but clear. They were winning, but at a cost measured in friends and brothers. Gates had lost 2 crews from his company. Patterson had lost 1. Every commander carried the weight of those deaths, questioned every decision that led to them. Did I call the retreat too late? Did I advance too soon? Did I miss something in the reconnaissance? "You're going to drive yourself crazy," Thornton told Gates after a particularly bad engagement. "You can't control everything. I can control my decisions, and my decisions got Miller's crew killed. Miller's crew got killed because a Panther was hiding in a barn we didn't know about. That's war earnest. Sometimes you do everything right and people still die. Then what's the point of tactics, of training, of any of this?" Thornton grabbed his shoulder. "The point is that we've killed 43 tanks and only lost 18. In a Sherman battalion, those numbers would be reversed. Your tactics, your training, your decisions are keeping most of your men alive. Not all, but most. That's all any commander can do." Gates wanted to believe him. Some days he could. Most days he couldn't. September 18th, 1944. Bivouac near Nancy, France. 22:30 hours. The orders came by radio at 22:30 hours. The 704th and 705th were being attached to 12 Corps for a push into Lorraine. Intelligence reported heavy German armor in the area, 5th Panzer Army, elite units, the best Germany had. "How heavy?" Russo asked his platoon leader. "Panthers, Tigers, maybe some of the new King Tigers if we're really unlucky." King Tigers. Those things are 70 tons. 68.5 actually, with an 88mm gun that can penetrate our armor from 2,000 yards. So we don't let them get a shot. That's the plan. The briefing came at midnight. Every commander packed into a tent that smelled of canvas and mud. Colonel Templeton, commanding the 704th, spread a map on a makeshift table. "Gentlemen, this is Arracourt, a small town in Lorraine, and tomorrow it's where we're going to rewrite the book on armored warfare." He pointed to red markers on the map. 5th Panzer Army, approximately 260 tanks. Panthers, mostly some Panzer IVs, maybe a few Tigers. They're preparing for a counterattack to retake Nancy. "And us?" Gates asked. 72 Hellcats, plus supporting armor and infantry. We're outgunned, outweighed, and outnumbered." "So a normal Tuesday," Patterson said. Nervous laughter rippled through the tent. "Here's the situation," Templeton continued. "The terrain around Arracourt is open farmland with some rolling hills. Good visibility. Long firing lanes. Exactly the kind of ground where German armor doctrine says they should dominate." "Should," someone said. "Should," Templeton agreed. "But that doctrine assumes their enemy fights like they do. Front to front. Armor against armor. The heaviest steel wins." He smiled grimly. "We're not going to fight like that." He traced lines on the map. "The Germans will advance in formation. Methodical, confident. What they won't expect is us hitting them from multiple directions at once. Appearing, firing, vanishing. Using every fold in the terrain to mask our approach and escape." "It's going to be chaos," Thornton said. "Controlled chaos," Templeton corrected. "And chaos is where speed beats weight." Questions. Russo raised his hand. "Sir, what's the expected casualty rate?" Templeton didn't hesitate. 50%. The tent went silent. "But," Templeton continued, "that's if we fight them their way. If we fight them our way using speed and maneuver, I think we can flip those numbers, maybe better." He looked around the tent. "Tomorrow we prove that speed is armor. Or we die trying. Get your crews ready. We roll at 0600. The commanders filed out into the cold September night. Overhead stars glittered with indifferent beauty. 50%, Wright said quietly. "He said that's if we fight their way," Russo replied. "We won't." "You sound confident." "I sound like a man trying to convince himself." Russo looked at his gunner. Tommy, I'm scared shitless. But I'm also angry. Angry at those German bastards for starting this war. Angry for every friend I've lost. Angry for your dad at Pearl Harbor. Angry for my brother who died in the Philippines. He turned to face Wright fully. Tomorrow we channel that anger into speed. We hit them so fast and hard, they'll think we're ghosts. And we survive. You hear me? I hear you, Sarge. Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow, we make history. But neither of them slept. Nobody did. They sat with their Hellcats checking equipment, writing letters home they hoped wouldn't be delivered posthumously, and waiting for dawn. Somewhere in the darkness, 5 kilometers away, German tank commanders did the same. They checked their Tigers and Panthers confident in their superiority, unaware that across those fields, something was coming that refused to play by their rules. At first light, the fog would rise, and in that fog, the Hellcats would hunt. Fast, lethal, and utterly unlike anything the 5th Panzer Army had ever faced. The dance of death was about to begin. Dawn broke over Arracourt at 05:47 hours on September 19, 1944, but nobody saw it. Fog rolled across the farmland like a living thing, reducing visibility to less than 50 yards. The kind of fog that swallowed sound, that turned familiar landscapes into alien territory. Russo sat in his commander's position listening. The Hellcat's engine idled quietly, a low rumble that seemed too loud in the oppressive silence. Somewhere out there beyond the fog, German armor was moving. He could feel it more than hear it, a vibration through the ground that spoke of heavy machinery on the prowl. "I can't see shit, Sarge," Wright whispered. "Good. Neither can they. How do we fight what we can't see? We listen, we wait, we move when they commit." Russo keyed his radio. "All units radio silence. Engine idle only. Wait for contact." The minutes crawled past. 0552, 0556, 0603. Then through the fog, a sound. The deep mechanical growl of German engines, heavy ones. Panthers, maybe Tigers. Multiple vehicles moving in formation. "Contact!" Russo breathed into the radio. "Bearing 270. Multiple engines. Stand by." "This is lead." Gates's voice crackled back. "All units hold position. Let them pass." "Sir, they're right on top of us." "I said hold." The German armor rolled closer. Through brief tears in the fog, Russo caught glimpses. A Panther massive and menacing. Another behind it. A third. They were advancing in a line, confident, unhurried. "They don't know we're here," Wright whispered. "Not yet." Russo watched the Panthers pass within 100 yards. Close enough to hear their crews talking inside the clank of equipment, the casual confidence of men who believed themselves invincible. When the last German tank disappeared into the fog, Gates came back on the radio. "All units, I have visual on their rear guard. 5 Panthers spread out. We're going to hit them from 3 sides simultaneously. 1st platoon take the left flank. 2nd platoon right flank. 3rd platoon, we go straight up the middle. On my mark, we advance at speed to 300 yards fire, then scatter. Clear." A chorus of acknowledgments. "Mark." Russo's driver punched the accelerator. The Hellcat leaped forward, fog streaming past. The speedometer climbed. 30, 40, 45 miles per hour through terrain. They could barely see, navigating by instinct and prayer. "Contact dead ahead," Wright yelled. "Panther 400 yards. Keep speed, close to 300. The German tank appeared fully through the fog. Russo saw the moment the enemy commander spotted them. Saw the turret begin its ponderous rotation. 250 yards. Fire. Wright's shot caught the Panther on the side armor exactly where the plates were thinnest. The German tank shuddered, smoke pouring from the engine compartment. "Reverse now!" The Hellcat shot backward at 40 miles per hour. Behind them, Russo heard the crack of other guns, saw flashes through the fog as the rest of his platoon engaged. "Contact left!" the driver screamed. Another Panther emerging from the fog at point-blank range. Its gun was already swinging toward them. "Hard right emergency turn." The driver spun the wheel. The Hellcat's suspension compressed as it pivoted at 35 miles per hour, tracks shrieking. The German shell passed through the space they'd occupied 1 second earlier. "Return fire." Wright fired while they were still moving. The shot went wide. "Reload. Reload." The German gunner was tracking them, compensating for their speed. In 2 seconds, maybe 3, he'd have them zeroed. Patterson's Hellcat appeared from nowhere, racing across the German tank's rear at 50 miles per hour. His gunner fired without stopping. The shell hit the Panther's engine deck. The German tank erupted in flames. "Move! Move, move!" Patterson's voice on the radio. "More coming from the north. At least 10 vehicles." The Hellcats scattered like startled birds, each racing in a different direction at maximum speed. The fog that had concealed the Germans now protected the Americans. By the time the German reinforcements arrived, the Hellcats had vanished. "Regroup at Rally Point Alpha," Gates ordered. "All units report status." "Second platoon all present. 1 hit on our flank armor, no penetration." "Third platoon lost Davis's crew. Took a round through the side." Russo felt his stomach drop. Davis was a kid from Michigan, 20 years old, married 3 months before shipping out. "Confirmed KIA?" Gates asked quietly. "Negative, sir. They bailed out. Drivers wounded rest are mobile." "Get them to the aid station. All other units were going again. The Germans are confused and angry. Let's keep them that way." What followed over the next 6 hours would be analyzed in military academies for decades. The Battle of Arracourt became a masterclass in mobile warfare, a demonstration of what speed and aggression could achieve against superior firepower. The Hellcats refused to fight the German way. They wouldn't hold ground, wouldn't form defensive lines, wouldn't engage in sustained duels. Instead, they flowed across the battlefield like water appearing from unexpected angles, firing vanishing before the Germans could respond effectively. "It's like fighting ghosts," a captured German tank commander would later tell interrogators. "We'd spot 1 rotate to engage and it was gone. Then 2 more would hit us from behind. We destroyed their positions, but they were never there. They were always moving." At 0847 hours, Russo's platoon caught 3 Panthers trying to establish a defensive position on a low hill. The Germans were hull down, using the terrain for protection exactly as doctrine dictated. "They're dug in good," Wright observed. "Front armor's protected." "Then we don't attack the front." Russo keyed the radio. "All units were going to loop around, hit them from the rear. Full speed, no stops." "Sir, that's 3 miles through open ground." "At 50 miles per hour, that's 3.5 minutes. Move." The Hellcats raced in a wide arc, engines screaming. The Germans focused on the approach from the front, never saw them coming from behind. By the time they realized the threat, it was too late. 3 shots, 3 hits, 3 burning Panthers. "That's 8 confirmed kills for our platoon," Wright said as they withdrew. "Keep counting later," Russo replied. "Eyes forward. There's always another one." By noon, the fog had burned off, revealing a battlefield that defied belief. Burning German armor dotted the landscape. Panthers. Panzer IVs. 1 Tiger caught alone and swarmed by 4 Hellcats working in concert. "Jesus," Patterson said, surveying the destruction. "We're actually winning." "Don't jinx it," Gates warned. But even he couldn't hide the disbelief in his voice. At 13:34 hours, the character of the battle changed. The Germans, reeling from losses, made a critical mistake. They committed their reserve armor all at once, a massed formation of 40 Panthers advancing in a line. "They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers," Thornton observed from the command post. "Or they're panicking," Templeton replied. Either way, massed formations are what we trained for. All units, this is Colonel Templeton. We have 40-plus Panthers advancing from the northeast. Do not engage frontally. I repeat, do not engage frontally. Use your speed. Hit the flanks. Hit the rear, force them to divide their attention. Make them turn their formation. Turning is dying. What happened next was later called the dance by military historians. 40 Panthers advancing in formation, believing their mass gave them strength. 72 Hellcats refusing to accept that mass mattered, darting in and out like wolves harrying a herd. Rousseau's platoon took the left flank. They raced parallel to the German formation at 45 miles per hour, just outside effective range. The Panthers, detecting the threat, began turning their turrets. "They're tracking us," Wright said. "Good. That means they're not watching their other flank." Rousseau glanced at his watch. "In 30 seconds, Patterson's platoon hits them from the right. Keep speed, stay outside their range." The German formation began to break. Some tanks kept advancing. Others slowed to engage the flanking threat. Their perfect line became ragged vehicles bunching up, blocking each other's fields of fire. "Now they're vulnerable," Rousseau muttered. He keyed the radio. "All units close to 400 yards and engage. Pick your targets." The Hellcats accelerated inward, closing the distance in seconds. At 400 yards, they fired almost simultaneously. The German formation, already disrupted, began to disintegrate under the onslaught. Panther hit 2 o'clock. Another burning 11 o'clock. I got one. But the Germans weren't finished. A Panther, its commander more aggressive or more desperate than the others, charged directly at Rousseau's Hellcat, not trying to engage from range, but attempting to ram them. "He's going to hit us," the driver yelled. "No, he's not. Hard left, maximum speed." The Hellcat pivoted, accelerating perpendicular to the charging Panther. The German tank, weighing 45 tons and moving at 25 miles per hour, couldn't adjust fast enough. It thundered past them, missing by yards. "He's exposed. Take the shot." Wright fired at the Panther's side armor from less than 200 yards. The shell penetrated clean through, detonating the ammunition storage. The German tank exploded with such force that burning debris rained down around them. Get back before something else locks on. They reversed at speed, putting distance between themselves and the chaos. Around them, the battle reached its crescendo. German tanks burning. American crews shouting coordinates. The crack of guns, the scream of engines, the acrid smell of cordite and burning steel. At 15:07 hours, the German formation broke completely. The surviving Panthers, perhaps 20 of them, began withdrawing in disorder. Some moved in reverse, not wanting to expose their rear armor. Others turned and fled at maximum speed. "They're running," Wright said with disbelief. "The Germans are running." "Don't pursue," Gates ordered over the radio. "I repeat, do not pursue. Let them go. Reform on Rally Point Bravo." As the Hellcats regrouped, crews climbed from their vehicles on shaking legs, faces black with powder residue, uniforms soaked with sweat despite the cool September air. Rousseau did a quick count. They'd started the day with 18 Hellcats in their company. 14 remained operational, 4 destroyed, but most of those crews had survived, bailing out before their vehicles burned. The Germans had committed approximately 60 tanks to the battle. By evening, count 38 were confirmed destroyed. Another 12 damaged and abandoned. Only 10 had escaped intact. "This is impossible," a junior officer said, staring at the preliminary reports. "These numbers can't be right." "They're right," Templeton said quietly. "We just proved that speed beats armor, that mobility beats mass, that intelligence beats firepower." He looked at the assembled commanders. "Gentlemen, we didn't just win a battle today, we invalidated an entire philosophy of warfare." But the cost was written on every face. Davis's crew, Morrison's Hellcat destroyed by a lucky shot from a dying Panther. Jenkins killed when his vehicle took a direct hit to the thin turret armor. 14 dead, Gates said that night sitting beside his Hellcat. 14 men who trusted me. 14 dead, Patterson replied, sitting beside him. Versus what, 200, 300 German dead? And how many of our guys didn't die because we killed those Panthers before they reached our infantry? That math doesn't make it easier. No, but it makes it necessary. Patterson lit a cigarette, hands still shaking with adrenaline. Ernest, today we did something no one thought possible. We beat the best armor the Germans have. Not by being stronger, but by being smarter. By being faster. Those 14 men died proving that American innovation can beat German steel. You sound like a recruitment poster. I sound like a man trying to justify why I'm alive and Davis isn't. Patterson took a long drag. The truth is, there's no justice in who lives and who dies. There's just speed and luck, and trying like hell to be in the right place when the shooting starts. They sat in silence for a long moment, listening to the sounds of the bivouac. Wounded being tended, crews performing maintenance, someone singing softly in the darkness. Tomorrow they'll come again, Gates said finally. Yeah, and we'll be ready. Will we? Or did we just use up all our luck in one day? Patterson didn't answer, because he was wondering the same thing. 2 miles away in the shattered German lines, Oberleutnant Klaus Weber sat in his Panther hands, still gripping the controls, though the engine had been cold for hours. His crew was dead. His company was destroyed. 40 tanks, reduced to scrap by an enemy that refused to fight honorably, that appeared and vanished like demons that moved with impossible speed. Was us? He whispered to the darkness the same question he'd asked that morning when the Americans first appeared. What are they? A voice from outside the tank. Survivors are to report to the assembly area. Weber climbed out slowly. Around him, burning American machines, but so few of them. Maybe 10 destroyed Hellcats versus 40 Panthers. The math was devastating. They weren't supposed to win, he said to no one. They're too light, too weak. They weren't supposed to win. But they had. And tomorrow they would do it again. As night fell over Arracourt, mechanics worked by lamplight to repair damaged Hellcats. Crews wrote letters home, their hands still shaking with adrenaline and fear. And in the darkness between the lines, both armies prepared for the next round of a battle that was rewriting everything anyone thought they knew about armored warfare. The dance had only begun. The second day began before dawn. At 05:12 hours on September 20th, German artillery opened up shells screaming through the darkness. The ground shook. Trees exploded into splinters. The Germans were done being subtle. They're pissed, Wright said, crouching beside the Hellcat as shrapnel whined overhead. They should be, Russo replied. We embarrassed them yesterday, made their best armor look like training dummies. Now they're going to try to crush us with everything they have. The barrage lasted 40 minutes. When it finally stopped, the silence felt unnatural. Then through the pre-dawn gloom came the sound every tanker dreaded. The deep mechanical growl of heavy armor. Lots of it. Contact! The radio crackled. Multiple vehicles advancing from multiple directions. They're trying to surround us. Gates stood in his turret, straining to see through the darkness. How many? Unclear, sir. At least 30. Maybe more. Colonel Templeton, we need orders. Templeton's voice came back steady despite the circumstances. All units, we're not going to sit here and get boxed in. We move now. Alpha Company, your point. Break through their eastern line at maximum speed. Everyone else follows. We'll regroup 5 miles east and hit them from a position of our choosing. This is a fighting withdrawal, not a retreat. Clear. Crystal, sir. Then move. Now. The Hellcats roared to life, engines screaming in the darkness. Russo's platoon took point, racing toward where reconnaissance reported the thinnest German lines. This is insane, Wright muttered. This is speed, Russo corrected. We're not faster than their shells, but we're faster than their ability to coordinate and respond. By the time they realize we've broken through, we'll be gone. They hit the German line at 0604 hours, doing 50 miles per hour in near darkness. A Panzer IV loomed out of the gloom, its crew clearly not expecting the Americans to charge straight at them. "Fire!" Russo commanded. Wright's shot hit the German tank dead center. They were past it before it even stopped moving, racing through the gap they'd created. "More tanks ahead," the driver yelled. "Don't stop, keep speed, shoot anything that moves." What followed was 3 miles of chaos, racing through German positions in the dark, firing on the move, taking hits that sparked off their thin armor without penetrating. The Germans, caught off guard by the audacity of the American maneuver, responded slowly, their shots going wide as the Hellcats blazed past. "We're through," Patterson reported. "Say again, we're through their line. All units maintain speed for 3 more miles, then assume defensive positions," Templeton ordered. "They'll follow us. Let them. We'll be ready." The sun rose at 6:41 hours, revealing a landscape transformed by battle. Burning vehicles dotted the fields. Shell craters pocked the earth. And racing across this devastation, the Hellcats repositioned for the next engagement. "They're following," Gates reported at 0723 hours. "Looks like 20 Panthers advancing in 2 columns." "Good," Templeton replied. "Let them close to 800 yards, then we hit them from 3 sides simultaneously. All units hold fire until my command." Russo watched the Germans approach through his binoculars. They were moving cautiously now, burned by yesterday's losses. Their formations were tighter, their intervals more precise. They'd learned. "They're being careful," Wright observed. "Careful is slow," Russo replied, "and slow is dead." At 800 yards, Templeton gave the order. "All units engage." 72 guns fired almost simultaneously. The German formation disappeared in a storm of fire and smoke. When it cleared, at least 8 Panthers were burning. The survivors scattered, trying to escape the kill zone. "Pursue," Templeton ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." The Hellcats gave chase like wolves after wounded prey. The Germans, forced to retreat at speed, exposed their thinner rear armor. More Panthers died, shot in the back as they fled. "This is slaughter," Wright said, his voice hollow. "This is war," Russo replied. "Yesterday they tried to slaughter us. Today we return the favor. That's how this works." But Wright's words stayed with him. Because the kid was right. This wasn't combat anymore. It was execution. The Germans had committed to an attack without understanding what they faced, and now they were paying for that ignorance with their lives. By 1100 hours, the German attack had collapsed completely. Of the 50-plus tanks they'd committed that morning, fewer than 20 escaped. The rest burned across 5 miles of French countryside. "Casualty report," Templeton requested. "Alpha Company 2 Hellcats destroyed. Both crews survived. Bravo Company 1 destroyed, crew KIA. Charlie Company 3 damaged, all repairable, no casualties. 3 dead Americans. 30-plus dead German tanks. The math was becoming routine, but it never stopped being terrible." That afternoon, as crews performed maintenance and ate cold rations, a photographer from Stars and Stripes arrived. He wanted to capture the heroes of Arracourt for the folks back home. "Smile for the camera, boys," he said cheerfully. "Smile?" Russo stared at him. "We've killed maybe 100 men in 2 days. You want us to smile?" The photographer lowered his camera. "I'm just trying to show folks back home that we're winning." "We're not winning," Patterson said quietly. "We're surviving. There's a difference." "But you've destroyed dozens of German tanks." "And they've killed our friends," Gates interrupted. "Davis, Morrison, Jenkins, Martinez. You want to take pictures? Take pictures of their empty seats. Send those home." The photographer left without taking any photos. "That was harsh," Wright said after he'd gone. "Good," Gates replied. "I'm tired of people treating this like a game. Like we're heroes. We're not heroes. We're just guys trying not to die while killing other guys trying not to die." "You don't think we're doing something important here?" Gates looked at his gunner for a long moment. "I think we're proving that speed beats armor. That American innovation can defeat German steel. That doctrine can be changed. He paused. But I also think that every panther we kill has 5 guys inside who probably don't want to be here any more than we do. And they're dead now because we were faster. That doesn't make us heroes. It makes us survivors. The German attacks continued for 3 more days, September 21st, 22, and 23. Each day following the same pattern. German armor advancing with determination. American Hellcats refusing to meet them head-on instead, using speed and maneuver to tear them apart from unexpected angles. September 21st, 23. German tanks destroyed for the loss of 5 Hellcats. September 22nd. 18. German tanks destroyed for the loss of 3 Hellcats. September 23rd. 15 German tanks destroyed for the loss of 4 Hellcats. The numbers told a story of systematic demolition. The 5th Panzer Army had entered the battle with approximately 260 tanks. By September 24th, they had fewer than 100 operational. Their offensive capability was shattered. "They're done," Thornton said during an officers' meeting on the evening of the 23rd. "Intelligence reports they're withdrawing to defensive positions. The counteroffensive is over." "We won," someone said, disbelief in their voice. "We survived," Templeton corrected. "Whether that's the same as winning, I'll let historians decide." But the cost was written in every face. The 704th and 705th Tank Destroyer Battalions had started the battle with 72 Hellcats. They ended it with 54 operational, 18 destroyed, 47 men killed, another 63 wounded. 47 killed. Gates said that night, staring at the casualty list. 47 names I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. "You kept it from being 400, Patterson replied. "If we'd fought them their way and Sherman's meeting them front to front, this battalion would have been destroyed. You know that." "Oh, knowing it doesn't make it easier." "Nothing about this is easy, Ernest. But those 47 men proved something that's going to save thousands more. They proved that speed is armor, that mobility beats mass, that American crews can beat German steel if we're smart about it." Gates wanted to believe that, needed to believe that, because the alternative was that 47 men had died for nothing. On September 25th, the Stars and Stripes photographer returned. This time he didn't ask anyone to smile. He just took pictures of the Hellcats of the tired crews performing maintenance of the empty seats where friends had sat. One photo would become iconic. Russo sitting on his Hellcat helmet off face, exhausted, staring at something beyond the camera. The caption would read, "Tank Destroyer Crew after the Battle of Arracourt. They destroyed 43 German tanks in 6 days." What the caption didn't say was that Russo was staring at the spot where Davis's Hellcat had burned, where a kid from Michigan who'd been married 3 months had died doing 45 miles per hour toward a Panther that got lucky. "You okay, Sarge?" Wright asked. "No," Russo replied honestly. "But I'm alive. That's going to have to be enough." 2 weeks later, official reports filtered up the chain of command. The Battle of Arracourt was being called one of the most decisive American armor victories of the war. The 704th and 705th Tank Destroyer Battalions had destroyed between 80 and 100 German tanks, effectively destroying the 5th Panzer Army as an offensive force, all while suffering relatively light casualties. Military analysts from West Point visited to study their tactics. British armor officers requested briefings. Even Soviet observers wanted to understand how the Americans had achieved such a lopsided victory. "The secret," Templeton told them during a formal debriefing, "is that we stopped thinking of armor as a defensive asset. We made it an offensive weapon. Speed became protection. Mobility became survival. We didn't try to out-armor the Germans. We out-thought them." "And the crews?" a British colonel asked. "How did they adapt to such unorthodox tactics?" Templeton looked at Gates, at Patterson, at Russo, sitting in the back of the room. They learned that in modern warfare, the side willing to innovate fastest wins. That doctrine is useful right up until the moment it gets you killed. That survival means being willing to do things that seem insane by conventional standards. Like charging through enemy lines in the dark, the British officer said. Like charging through enemy lines in the dark, Templeton confirmed. Because sitting still and trading shots with Panthers is suicide. But moving at 50 miles per hour, appearing where they don't expect hitting them from angles they can't defend. That's how light armor beats heavy armor. After the formal briefing ended, as officers filed out discussing what they'd learned, Russo remained seated. Gates approached him. "You okay, Mike?" "I keep thinking about Weber," Russo said quietly. "Who?" "The German tank commander. The one Patterson's crew captured after his Panther got hit. He kept asking, 'Was ist das? What is this like?' He couldn't understand what had happened. Like the whole world had stopped making sense. So I wonder if we're any different. We spent 6 days killing men in tanks, and now we're sitting in briefings talking about tactics and doctrine, like it was a chess game. But it wasn't chess. It was men burning alive. German men, sure. Enemy men. But still men." Gates was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. But if we don't study it, if we don't learn from it, then they died for nothing. Both our guys and theirs. The only way to make any of this mean something is to ensure it saves more lives than it cost." "You really believe that?" "I have to," Gates replied. "Because the alternative is going crazy thinking about all the ways we could have done things differently. All the decisions that got people killed. All the luck that kept us alive when better men died." Russo stood slowly. "Speed is armor." "Speed is armor," Gates confirmed. They walked outside together where their Hellcats sat in neat rows, maintenance complete, ready for the next battle. Crews cleaned weapons, wrote letters home, tried to find moments of normalcy in the insanity of war. Wright approached carrying a newspaper. "Sarge, you seen this?" He held up the front page. The headline read, "American tank destroyers crush German armor at Arracourt." "Crush is a strong word," Russo said. "We killed 80 tanks in 6 days. And they killed 47 of us. That's not crushing. That's bleeding. We just bled less than they did." Wright looked at the paper again, then at his sergeant. "You think anyone back home understands that?" "No," Russo replied. "And maybe that's for the best. Let them celebrate the victory. Let them believe we're heroes. Let them think war is glorious. Because if they knew the truth, if they really understood what it cost to win, they might never let us do it again." "Would that be so bad?" Russo looked at the rows of Hellcats at the empty spaces where destroyed vehicles once stood at the faces of crews who'd seen too much too young. "Ask me when the war's over, kid. Ask me when we're home and the shooting stopped and we have time to think about something other than survival. Then maybe I'll have an answer." As October arrived, and the Hellcats prepared to move to their next assignment, the fields around Arracourt remained scarred with the evidence of what had happened there. Burned-out tanks, both German and American. Shell craters that would take decades to fully disappear. And in the small French cemetery outside town, 47 white crosses marking the graves of men who proved that speed could beat armor, but couldn't beat death. The doctrine had changed. The warfare had evolved. But the cost remained what it had always been paid in blood, by young men who deserved to grow old. The Hellcats rolled into Germany in March 1945, 6 months after Arracourt. The war was ending, everyone could feel it, but the dying continued. Every town, every crossroad, every bridge defended by men who knew they'd lost, but fought anyway because orders were orders, and surrender was treason. Russo's Hellcat had a name now painted on the glacis plate, in white letters, Ghost. Wright had done it one night in Belgium, said it fit what they'd become. Phantoms that appeared from nowhere killed and vanished. The name stuck. "Town ahead," the driver reported. "Looks quiet." "They always look quiet," Russo replied. He'd learned that lesson through 37 engagements across France, Belgium, and now Germany itself. Quiet towns were where ambushes waited, where Panzerfausts hid in windows, where teenage boys with old men's eyes pulled triggers because someone told them it was patriotic to die. They entered the town slowly, every sense screaming alert. The streets were empty, buildings damaged but standing. No civilians. No movement. Wrong. Everything felt wrong. "I don't like this," Wright muttered. "Neither do I." Driver stop. Engine idle. They sat in the center of the town square waiting, listening. Then from a doorway, a white flag. An old man emerged, hands raised. He said something in German. "Anyone speak German?" Russo called on the radio. "Little bit," Gates replied from the lead Hellcat. He climbed down, approached the old man cautiously. They spoke for a moment, the old man gesturing, pointing east. Gates returned. "He says the Wehrmacht pulled out 3 days ago. Only civilians left. Mostly old people and kids. The fighting men are all dead or retreated east." "You believe him?" "I don't know, but if he's lying, he's a hell of an actor." They moved through the town carefully, weapons ready. The old man had told the truth. No soldiers, no defenses. Just hollow-eyed civilians watching from windows, too tired to be afraid anymore. In the town square, someone had erected a monument. Recent. The concrete was still fresh. A list of names carved into stone. Local boys who'd died in Russia, in France, in North Africa. 53 names from a town of maybe 200 people. "Jesus," Wright said quietly. "They lost everyone." "They started a war," Patterson said, his voice hard. "This is what happens when you start wars." "These people didn't start anything," Russo replied. "These are just names. Kids who died because someone else made decisions." He looked at the monument again. "Same as Davis, same as Morrison, same as all of ours. That's different." "Is it?" Russo challenged. "We're on the right side, sure. We're liberating, not conquering. But those German kids and their Panthers at Arracourt, you think they wanted to be there? You think they chose to burn?" Patterson had no answer. They stayed in the town that night. The civilians kept their distance, unsure how the Americans would treat them. Russo found himself sitting on the steps of what had been the town hall, staring at the monument with its 53 names. An old woman approached, carrying a tray with bread and water. She set it down without speaking, started to leave. "Wait," Russo said. She stopped, fear in her eyes. He pointed to the monument. "Your son." She understood the gesture, if not the words. Nodded slowly. Pointed to a name. Klaus Nunzenyara. 19 years old. "I'm sorry," Russo said, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping she'd understand the tone. She looked at him for a long moment, then back at the monument. "Krieg," she said quietly. "War." The one word that needed no translation. After she left, Wright sat down beside his sergeant. "You okay, Sarge?" "I was thinking about Weber, the Panther commander we captured at Arracourt. He was maybe 22, farm kid from Bavaria. Probably has a mother like that woman waiting for him to come home, not knowing he's sitting in a POW camp in Belgium. He tried to kill us." "Yeah, and we killed his crew. And tomorrow we'll kill more Germans, and they'll try to kill us, and eventually one side will run out of people to kill, and we'll call that victory." Russo pulled out a cigarette, didn't light it. "Tommy, what the hell are we doing?" "Winning the war." "No. What are we really doing? Because I look at that monument and I see 53 reasons why this whole thing is insane. 53 kids from one tiny town. How many more monuments like this are there? Thousands. Tens of thousands. And for what?" Wright was quiet for a long time. "My dad died at Pearl Harbor. You remember me telling you that?" "Yeah. I used to think I was fighting for him. Revenge. You know, kill the bastards who killed him. But lately I've been thinking maybe I'm fighting so other kids don't end up like me. So other dads don't end up like him." Wright gestured to the monument. "So other towns don't have to carve 53 names into stone." "You think we're succeeding?" "I think we're trying. That's got to count for something." The war ended on May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The Hellcat sat in a field outside Frankfurt Engines, silent for the first time in months. No more shooting, no more hunting, no more dying. "It's over," someone said, but it didn't feel real. Gates gathered his officers. Official word just came down. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe is finished. "What do we do now?" Patterson asked. "We go home," Gates replied. "Eventually. First they'll want us to occupy to help rebuild, to make sure it doesn't start again. But yeah, we go home." Russo tried to feel relief. Joy. Something. But all he felt was exhaustion. Bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep would cure. That night, as crews celebrated with whatever alcohol they could scrounge, Russo found himself walking through the field where the Hellcats were parked. 54 vehicles had fought at Arracourt. 23 remained operational. The rest had been destroyed, destroyed again, across 8 months of nearly continuous combat. He stopped at his Hellcat, ran his hand along the thin armor. Dents from near misses, scratches from branches, scorch marks from fires that had gotten too close. This machine had carried him across France, Belgium, and Germany, had protected him with nothing but speed and luck. "Speed is armor," he said to the empty night. "You still believe that?" Gates approached from the darkness. "I'm alive, aren't I? So yeah, I believe it. Question is, was it worth believing? We won." "We survived," Russo corrected using Gates's own words from months earlier. "We proved that speed beats armor, that mobility beats mass, that American innovation can defeat German steel, but at what cost, Ernest? How many names got carved into how many monuments because we proved a point?" Gates was silent for a long moment. 73 names from our battalion alone. 73 men who climbed into these machines believing speed would protect them. Did it? For most of them, yes. The casualty rates for Hellcat crews were half what Sherman crews suffered. Half. That means for every man we lost, we saved 2. That has to mean something. Does it mean enough? Gates had no answer. 3 weeks later, orders came for the battalion to redeploy to the States. The Hellcats would be shipped separately, most destined for storage or scrapping. The war was over. The need for tank destroyers had ended. "They're going to put them in museums," Wright said, as they prepared their Hellcat for transport. "People will come look at them and read little plaques about speeds and armor thickness and gun calibers." "But they won't know what it felt like," Russo replied. "They won't know what it's like to do 50 miles per hour toward a Panther knowing one hit will kill you. They won't know the sound of the engine, the smell of cordite the way your hands shake after. Should we tell them? Would they understand if we did?" Wright thought about that. Probably not, but maybe we should tell them anyway. On June 15, 1945, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion boarded ships in Antwerp, bound for New York. Russo stood on the deck as Europe disappeared behind them, thinking about all the things they were leaving behind. The dead, the destroyed, the monuments with their endless lists of names. "You going to be okay, Sarge?" Wright asked. "Eventually, maybe. Ask me in 10 years. What are you going to do when we get home?" Russo had thought about this. Through long nights and longer days, he'd thought about what came after. "I'm going to remember," he said finally. "Davis and Morrison and Jenkins and all the rest. I'm going to remember that they proved something important, that they changed warfare, that they mattered. That's it. Just remember." Tommy, remembering is the most important thing we can do. Because if we forget, if we let their deaths become just statistics in a history book, then they really did die for nothing. But if we remember, if we tell their stories, then maybe, just maybe, we make sure it meant something. The voyage home took 11 days. 11 days of calm seas and too much time to think. Russo spent most of it writing letters he'd never send to crews who'd never read them, trying to find words for things that had no words. On June 26th, they saw the Statue of Liberty rising from New York Harbor. The ship erupted in cheers. Men cried. Some laughed. Others just stared in silence at the skyline they'd wondered if they'd ever see again. Russo felt nothing. Or rather, he felt everything at once, and it canceled out to numbness. "We made it," Wright said beside him. "We actually made it home." "Part of us did," Russo replied. "The rest is still in France. We'll always be in France." They were processed through Fort Dix, given discharge papers, told they were heroes, offered parades and medals and gratitude. Most of them just wanted to go home to sleep in real beds, to try to remember what normal felt like. The battalion held one final formation on July 3, 1945. Colonel Templeton, who'd commanded them through Normandy and Arracourt and a dozen other battles, addressed them for the last time. "Gentlemen, when we deployed to Europe, we were an experiment, an unproven doctrine using unproven machines with unproven tactics. The experts said it wouldn't work. That speed couldn't replace armor. That mobility couldn't defeat mass. You proved them wrong." He paused, looking at the assembled men. Boys when they'd arrived in England. Something else now. Something older. "This battalion destroyed 497 German tanks, more than any other tank destroyer unit in the European theater. You did it with lighter armor, thinner protection, and tactics that seemed insane by conventional standards. You did it by being faster, smarter, and braver than any enemy you faced." Another pause. Longer. "But that's not what I want you to remember. I want you to remember the 73 names. The men who didn't come home. Who proved with their lives that innovation has a cost. That changing warfare doesn't mean making it bloodless, just making it different." His voice roughened. "Remember them. Tell their stories. Make sure their sacrifice meant something. Because if we forget, if we let their deaths become just numbers in a report, then we've failed them worse than any enemy ever could." The formation was dismissed. Men scattered, heading home to families and futures they'd wondered if they'd ever reach. Russo found Gates standing alone, staring at nothing. "What are you going to do, Ernest?" "Stay in the army. Try to make sure what we learned doesn't get forgotten. That some future generation of tank crews doesn't have to relearn these lessons at the same cost we paid. Think they'll listen? Probably not. Doctrine is stubborn. Bureaucracy is rigid. In 10 years, they'll probably be building heavy tanks again, convinced that armor matters more than speed." Gates smiled without humor. "But at least I'll know I tried. And if another war comes, then we'll have to pray that someone remembers Arracourt. That someone remembers the Hellcat. That someone understands that warfare changes and the side that adapts fastest wins." He looked at Russo. "What about you, Mike? What are you going to do?" "Go home, see my parents. Try to figure out how to be a normal person again." Russo paused. "And remember, that's all I can do. Remember, and make sure others remember too." They shook hands, these men who'd survived together through 8 months of combat, who'd proven that speed could defeat armor, but couldn't defeat memory. "Speed is armor," Gates said. "Speed is armor," Russo replied. "But memory is forever." 40 years later, in 1985, Russo stood in front of a restored M18 Hellcat at the Patton Museum in Fort Knox, Kentucky. His hands, now age-spotted and trembling, touched the thin armor he'd once trusted with his life. "Grandpa," a young voice, his grandson 15 years old, full of questions about the war. "Yeah, kid. Is this really what you fought in? It looks so small, so thin." It was small, it was thin, barely enough armor to stop shrapnel, but it was fast. Fastest tank destroyer of the war. That speed kept us alive. "Were you scared?" Russo looked at the boy, this child who'd never heard a shot fired in anger, who'd grown up in a world that Russo and men like him had died to create. "Terrified, every single day. But we learned to turn that fear into fuel, to move so fast that the enemy couldn't catch us, To think so quick that we were always ahead of them. Did it work? I'm standing here, aren't I? Russo smiled. It worked. Not always. Not for everyone. 73 men from our battalion alone didn't make it home. But for most of us, yeah, it worked. He walked around the Hellcat, slowly remembering. Davis burning in his destroyed vehicle. Wright's face the first time they killed someone. Gates's determination to make sure the lessons weren't forgotten. Patterson's fierce joy after Arracourt. The old German woman and her monument with 53 names. Grandpa, why are you crying? Because this machine changed warfare. Proved that innovation beats tradition. That speed beats armor. That American ingenuity could defeat German steel. He paused, wiping his eyes. But it also cost lives. Good men. Better men than me. And I want to make sure people remember that. Remember them. His grandson was quiet for a moment. Tell me their names. And Russo did. Davis, Morrison, Jenkins, Martinez. All 73 names from the battalion. Names he'd carried for 40 years. Names he'd never forget. Names that deserved to be spoken aloud, to be remembered, to mean something beyond statistics in a history book. When he finished, his grandson said quietly, "I'll remember them too." "Good," Russo replied. "That's all we can do. Remember and make sure others remember. Because they earned that. They earned the right to be more than forgotten names on forgotten monuments. They earned the right to be remembered as men who changed the world, even if it cost them everything." They stood in silence before the Hellcat, 3 generations connected by memory and sacrifice. The machine sat quiet now, its engine forever stilled, its fighting days long over. But the lessons it taught, the doctrine, it proved, the lives it saved and cost, those echoed through every tank design that came after. Speed had been armor. Memory became legacy. And in museums and history books, at veteran reunions and family dinners, the story of the Hellcat lived on. Not as triumph, not as glory, but as truth. As witness to what young men could achieve when asked to do the impossible, and what it cost them to succeed. They built the doctrine with courage and proved it with blood. And though most of them slept now in foreign soil or American cemeteries, their names carved in stone that would outlast empires, they lived on in memory. In stories told by old men to young boys. In restored machines that would never fight again but would always teach. In the understanding that warfare changes, that innovation matters, that speed can defeat armor, but memory defeats forgetting, and that, in the end, is the only victory that truly lasts. If you believe these names deserve to be remembered, share this story. Write a name in the comments. Keep the memory alive. Because they earned that much. They earned everything.